I have a brother and his name is Oscar. He's about 4 years older than me, used to give me the hardest time in the world, okay? Most notably for calling me a suck up, all right? And fat. He called me fat for a long time. But every once in a while, we'd play like something together. We were actually brothers for brief periods of time in our childhood, but no matter what, it was almost always competitive. And when I say I'm competitive, just know I am very competitive. Very competitive, all right? Ask Dakota during the live stream last month on how that went. Our rivalry as brothers has always existed, and it'll just never go away. And in the car world, there's that little bro, big bro syndrome that's existent to this day, kind of. I'm Alex, Alex.fi on Instagram, and today we're gonna be talking about and drumming up the past like a drunk conversation at a bar with sticky floors. We're talking about one of the best things to happen in the car industry, which incited innovation. It created aggressions and slogans that would be used by car manufacturers for decades to come, only be replaced by literally zero direct callouts or competition, because for some reason that's just not something people seem to do these days. We're talking about what happened to the biggest car rivalries in the world. Before we even get into it, what in your eyes is the greatest rivalry of all time? Okay, plus 2 points if it's car related, but drop a comment below. Or you can just banter about Taco John's and Taco Bell, but I would argue TJ's is objectively better because of their potato olay. And if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. We've evolved our own wheel brand into a Novio wheels from Artisa, and if you're interested in learning more, you can actually watch that video that's here. It's kind of a big deal. Now, let's jump into the good old car rivalry. Car rivalries, Lamborghini versus Ferrari, Ford versus Ferrari, Deadmau 5 versus Ferrari. Honestly, Ferrari's got some daddy issues when you really look at the rivalries going on. But when you look at car rivalries in general, they almost always spawn from two conflicting egos about who or what is better. That's pretty much where it all comes from. I mean, when you think about it, the story that we probably all know most recently because of modern film is the story about Ferrari versus Ford, right? And you start talking about the Le Mans series, the upheaval that Ford had from 1966 to 1969 because of just how angry they were at Ferrari, and not to become a racing company. That's not really what was Ford's thing. Sure, they wanted to get into sportsman style automotive racing, but not that big. And not to make Ford sell more overseas, because that wasn't a focus for Ford either. And it wasn't because Carroll Shelby winked nicely at the Ford company. No, I mean, the reason that whole thing went down is because Enzo Ferrari used them like a pawn in the early 60s during sale negotiations to essentially lift a better evaluation from Fiat to buy them, which is ultimately what snarkingly became a huge competition with Ford and Ferrari, because Ferrari didn't think that Ford was going to do absolutely anything about it. And that's when you have really the question of what happened. Ford would go back to the, domestic area of the world with a little fire under their foot and built a GT40, which spanked the ever-living daylights out of Ferrari for 3 years straight. In 1966, that race was idolized as probably one of the favorite racing films out there right now, right next to Cars 2, and would become the iconic 1-2-3 victory that Ford would hold over Ferrari's head forever, and still is a story told by this day by Ford. If that doesn't tell you like how determined people can be, I don't know what will. And this was across the board. Automobile manufacturers were coming up and building things all over the world, and with that growth came conflicting ideologies, conflicting personalities, and probably the most important thing from the mid-20th century that spewed some of our favorite race cars, that thing we call ego. You have to remember, in the 20th century, there's tons of new cars and car manufacturers coming through the gates, and with all that conflicting stuff, you naturally created a lot of agitation, arguments, and ultimately some straight up rivalry. And if the rivalry wasn't started because of some personal squabble, it was definitely caused by the racetrack, both on asphalt and in the dirt. A rivalry that is more likely known and more likely to activate people like you and people like me would be things like the Subaru versus Mitsubishi. Now, the World Rally Championship stage was big, specifically back in the 80s and 90s, and both car manufacturers were trying to pretty much take the crown. And when you looked at that style, the World Rally Championship, Mitsubishi and Subaru were some of the big, well, they were the big two. The Mitsubishi would ultimately bow out in more recent years in production models to focus on whatever it is that Mitsubishi focus on these days, which is kind of sort of just, you know what I'm talking about, all right? Mitsubishi's like that one really close friend that kind of went off and went to jail and did a bunch of stuff, so you don't really remember the new version of him, but the old version of him, that's Mitsubishi. Car rivalries were just a way to brag about which brand was better, but it also drove some of the biggest and best technological innovations in the automotive industry that we now take for granted. Take the Nissan GT-R. When it was coming up to fray, it was actually going to go up and go toe-to-toe with the European market, most notably the Porsche Turbo 911, and that rivalry graced us in the late 2000s. Now, Nissan had essentially taken their supercar killer to the Nürburgring to set the track record and show the world that a tuner car could take on even the likes of European supercars, a market that it wasn't even traditionally very much attacking. Now, Porsche, the man in the bow tie, wasn't going to have it and ended up revising its 911 Turbo through tweaks throughout the years of the car's performance for future years to consistently stay on top with even more track records. That's why essentially when you look at a 2010 or 2011 Turbo, everybody absolutely loves the production model. And that's what's really exciting, because if you pick up a 2010 or 2011 Porsche Turbo, you're probably picking up one of the best Porsche Turbos ever made. And some of the elements that make the car so great came from the rivalry that the GT-R kind of spawned on it when it entered the Nürburgring track records. Now, going back to the Subaru versus Mitsubishi rivalry, we wouldn't have had our very favorite Evo or STI platform without the WRC and its regulations on rallying, because essentially for you to even be in it, you had to build production versions of the race cars to sell to the public to even be eligible. So what became a competition rivalry ultimately became an enthusiast and community rivalry that would spawn the technologies like the yaw control that you can get, all-wheel drive differential splits, you get boxer configuration engine layout, something that typically wasn't going to be coming in any sort of production model car, and more tech that most people on the street just really don't need. But they're cool buttons, and I'm gonna press them if I'm in the car because I want to see what they do when I'm in the wintertime. But as we start to get closer to the more painful, we'll call them 2020s, it seems like car rivalries started to die off on the motorsport scene, only to be replaced with everyone chasing the electric vehicle craze and all the unknowns that come along with it. Outside of the Formula One Netflix series, there's still some conflict over there, but it's kind of like a reality TV show, so you take that with a grain of salt. So what exactly happened to car rivalries? The things that brought us some of the greatest wheels like the Enkei RPF1 from McLaren Honda's Formula One team. The rivalries that brought us the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2, which is arguably one of the best street tires on the market that you can still run around on the track on. Fitmentindustries.com. All right, well, let's talk about it, okay? Competition and rivalries now seem to exist in legacy alone. It's kind of sort of depressing because when you look at it, World Rally Championship just doesn't hold the same stranglehold in international media as it did in the past. You don't really see us talking about it a ton, or if you do, it just doesn't carry the same amount of fans. Now, NASCAR isn't a heavily branded manufacturing rivalry, and as a result, one of the US's greatest pastimes doesn't get a lot of younger enthusiasts to stand behind a certain brand. It mostly makes you stand behind a certain person. Rivalries on the person, excuse me, not on the car. What you're left with is the iconic European rivalries, pretty much Chevrolet versus Ford rivalry that's existed for 35,000 years, or the occasional manufacturer coming out with something that sounds cool like the GR Yaris, only to never come to the States, because why would you ever introduce something cool to the States? Because people don't buy hot hatches in the United States, that's why, okay? I'm not convinced that it's ever gonna happen either way, and I'm sorry. But there still are some rivalries in the car game, but not on things that are driving our favorite wheel, tire, and suspension companies to do new stuff, really, or to be really as fast as they once used to be. Everybody's gonna be going through a little bit of an awkward teenage puberty phase, okay? Right now, the biggest rivalry is pretty much all technology, and it's got auto manufacturers working together to take on a new industry competitor in the scene, something that's not a car manufacturer, the tech companies. Companies like Tesla was the first successful splash to challenge the status quo for car manufacturers on the production side. Electric vehicle production shook up what it meant to go fast for standard consumers. I mean, really, who cares about a track when 98% of the people just want to know that they can go 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds and brag about it on your favorite Facebook forum because you're a Tesla person? Screw noise! We're going to give you a tablet with the size of a newborn child and we'll fake the noise so it sounds cool. You'll feel like you're in Blade Runner 2049. Forget straight and narrow, we're going to upload a file so you can watch your doors go up and down and move the doors in weird directions that make me question if the shocks are actually going to stay good for more than 3 years. That's a thing that nobody ever did before, pretty much until Tesla, successfully. Car rivalries aren't what they once were. Outside of the professional racing world, it's more so just auto manufacturers now competing against two pretty big things coming down the wire. Number one is Tesla, or two, the tech and rideshare companies. Now, rideshare companies are continuing to show the European market their value, which has more and more people getting rid of their Peugeot, their Fiat, okay, in place for a $5, you know, Uber share thing and a pack of Thin Mints in the back of a cup holder of a stranger's car. This is a thing that's really happening right now, and it's got a lot of people shooken up. These rivalries are causing European companies to share electric plugins, to buy and sell systems and warning alarms, to do everything they can to keep their stranglehold on the automotive industry. But how long is it really going to last? I think they call it an oligopony. Either way, companies like Porsche released the Taycan, and that's their take on a proper electric sports car. And while it looks beautiful, and I want one very, very much, it's still littered with quirks and features that would make Dougie D wiggle in his good old cargo shorts in the summertime. The Plaid is Tesla's next evolution on making a car that actually has like even door gaps on both sides and a functional amount of interior sound deadening material so it doesn't sound like an IKEA couch going down the highway. It's still brand new. You look at Chevy, they just released a 2024 Chevrolet electric vehicle truck with 664 horsepower, a 400-mile range, 24-inch OEM wheels, and a fully capable 9-foot bed that you can put down the seats so that you can have more space. It has pretty much everything that sounds like what we would want out of a truck. But the last thing we saw from Chevrolet that was even mildly successful was the Volt and the EV1. It's hideous. Everyone is challenging this progression into electric vehicles, and while everyone's running towards it, there's not many people talking about who's actually going to be doing it best and for how long. Needless to say, regardless if the competition goes electric, that doesn't inherently mean the value of lightweight wheels, minimized rotational mass, or suspension is going to go away anytime soon. In fact, it's probably going to get even more important for people to be talking about the weight of their wheels, the things that go into tires, and of course, suspension. Suspension will likely go away from coilovers, but air suspension will still be a thing. That is, if they let you, because Tesla can just like lock you out of your car. But with all that being said, wheels like the Inovia Artisa Elder are still lighter than a Tesla Plaid wheel. Ask the Hamilton collection. So you can modify your car and still get better range than what they offer. OE tires have hardly scratched the surface of what's possible, but once Michelin and companies like Continental start putting the old constructor's hat on, I'm sure you're gonna see some of the lightest tires that they've ever made specifically for electric vehicles. And for air suspension, companies like Airlift, AccuAir, and Universal Air will likely to continue dominating that segment as installation of those components actually get easier. You see a ton of Tesla 3s on air and it looks absolutely fantastic, all right? But in all honesty, the rivalry of the future is all speculation. It really, at the end of the day, it's kind of like a butthole, and I'm not gonna say the rest of it because you know where that's going. But what do you think? Let us know below, and if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, regardless of if it's for an EV or not, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. Plus, we got a bunch of stocks so we can get to you in 10 days or less in case you're a procrastinator like me, because it is January, and next thing you know, it's gonna be March. I'm Alec from Fitment Industries, and we will see you later. Peace.